Things that burn. Forests. Varushka has endured the attacks of Cold Sun with a certain degree of pragmatism. The Scions avoid the dark woods and the haunted hills, sticking close to the iron roads. There have been victories, the defence of Veresk, and losses, like the raid against the Eternal Shafts of Time. Some Varushkans saw the Heralds of Cold Sun as being of no greater threat than the wolves that have always haunted their nation. With the unexpected arrival of several thousand well-organised Scions in Volodmarts and Karov, however, that complacency has been seriously shaken. The Shepherds of Ash. In the depths of Volodmarts in the woodlands of Livards stands a peculiar grove of trees. Black-barked, their trunks mottled with peculiar crystal outgrowths, the Sumisev Pegel and the weak Regio that lies at its heart are named for the 2 centuries dead Volov, who discovered it and first tapped its weak magic to perform simple divinations for the folk of the surrounding vales. Few people bother to visit. The crystals are nice, but not worth the effort to gather them. Their glow fades quickly when removed from the grove. When the power of day washed over the Empire at the summer solstice, however, the spark of light in the Sumisev Pegel roared up like a bonfire, and the invisible door at its centre gaped wide enough to allow 3,000 Scions of Cold Sun to come through to the mortal realm. They quickly set about refashioning the area to their liking. The trees were blasted to ash, but they wove the crystals into a protective ring of razor-sharp spines. From the Regio they began to spread out across Livards, zealously pursuing the goal of their terrible master, consigning everyone and everything in Varushka to oblivion. Imperial magicians have done what they can. A black granite fortress sprawls across the hilltops of Opaskari. The forests of Murup and Suvrets are wound around with spring magic, creating impassable barriers and inspiring the natural beasts who live there to savage violence rather than flight before the unnatural heralds of the day realm. These potent magical defences provide protection to the Warden and allow those boyars so inclined to risk their Schlachter in the protection of their southern neighbours. The invaders try to avoid the Spring Wards and the Summer Citadel alike, protecting the rest of Volodmarts from their depredations. This is a good thing for the people outside Livards, not so for those who must endure the full strength of the Shepherds of Ash. There are a great many Varushkans in prosperous Livards, many vales and villages. The Scions move methodically out from the Sumisev Pegel, slaughtering anyone who crosses their path, razing every building that comes within their reach, leaving behind only pale ash and silence. While the Shepherds of Ash do not venture north into the rest of Volodmarts, the wealthy region is itself something of a crossroads. While the bulk of the invading force is focusing on devastating Livards, probing strikes are sent into northern Malimorzi, western Nitrost and eastern Dupadiluri. The Scions that compose these scouting parties are no more merciful than the rest of their kind, but they've not come in strength sufficient to do more than slaughter a few dozen merchants and pilgrims and burn a few farms. There is resistance to the Shepherds of Ash, but it is sporadic and disorganised. Individual boyars look to the protection of their own vales before they worry about their neighbours. There are those prepared to fight the Scions on the roads, or to defend the vales and settlements they seek to burn, but they are few in number. Without the sellswords and wardens committed to defend Varushka, without the Dornish knights drawn to adventure across the dark land, there would have been little to actually stand in the way of the Shepherds at all. And on the other side of the Sungold Pass, an army of Thule warriors waits, blue-clad orcs, under the command of a warlock general. They make no secret of their presence, right there on the liminal line where Varushka becomes Otgadov. They seem to be waiting for some signal, a signal that never comes. As the winter solstice draws near, they break their camp and move back into the lands of the northern orcs. The Shepherds of Ash have been contained, but within their confines they have run riot. Nearly a dozen vales and settlements across Livards have been shattered or razed. Several hundred people have been slain, many more forced to flee, abandoning their homes. When the wind blows from the south, it brings with it the ashes of those the heralds have obliterated, a grim reminder to the rest of Varushka of the fate that awaits them should the cold sun not be stopped. Game information: Volodmarts. The Shepherds of Ash have not conquered any territory in Volodmarts, but neither have they suffered any casualties. The wealthy region of Livards has gained the ruins quality, and the taxation of the territory as a whole has been reduced due to the loss of so many prosperous vales. The Blade of Skies. Dizikani is the civilized, tamed heart of Karov, and one of the richest places in Varushka thanks to the prosperous trading town of Delev. Merchants from Temeshwar and Dawn are regular visitors, coming to deal with their counterparts from the northern nation. The first sign that something is amiss comes when the bees across Dizikani suddenly vanish. Hives from one end of the region to the other are suddenly found empty, to the consternation of their keepers. The second sign comes to a sleepy little southern vale along the road into Weirwater. Bulgakov was a quiet and shaded vale, mostly a stopping-off point for merchants travelling to and from Dawn. It is gone now. Shortly before the autumn equinox, the weekday regio that lay on its outskirts tore open, and an army of scions of the cold sun emerged. The Vale's folk of Bulgakov were taken completely by surprise, if not for the intervention of a band of Dawnish knights-errant resting at the village on their way north. The Blade of Skies would have killed every single person in the Vale, even with the unlooked-for aid of the glory-seeking Yofolk. A third of Bulgakov's inhabitants were turned to ash in the course of a single night. The rest fled north to Delev, or east to Hawthorne, escaping with little but their own lives. None of the young knights survived. All that remains of Bulgakov now is a scar, a circle of ash and glass and splintered, burnt wood. Imperial magicians have done what they can to stop the rest of Karov sharing Bulgakov's fate. The wooden fastness has been forged in Skoramuyak. A squat keep of dark blue ice and stone extrudes from a hillside in Wilijka. Just as in Volodmarts, these protections provide support to the defenders, while the Blade of Skies themselves gives them a wide berth. The bulk of the defence of Dizaken falls to the slapter of the individual vales, however, bolstered by Warden Fellowships and by a handful of sellswords and Dawnish knights attracted by the opportunity to adventure in Vorushka. They are nowhere near enough to stop the Blade of Skies, however. The army moves methodically across Dizikani and Kamienshka, destroying everyone and everything they encounter. It becomes clear fairly quickly that the force move with almost supernatural speed and surety. Even without the iron roads, they seem capable of covering great distances with surprising alacrity. Also, unlike the other armies of Scions seen across the Empire, they remain together. They send out no raiding parties, make no probing attacks. Rather, they focus their entire force on whatever is in front of them, annihilate it, and move on. They use this capacity to strike seemingly at random across both Kamienshka and Dizikani. Yet there is clearly some wider strategy guiding the targets they choose. Almost every vale or village they turn their attention to meets a terrible fate. Wherever they are victorious, after they've killed everyone, they unmake the settlement, destroying every building and leaving a circle of glass and ash similar to that at Bulgakov. These circles are also seen wherever the army is stopped for any period of time, and those who come too close to those blasted zones report a strange dizziness and a feeling of dread. Some of those foolish enough to explore these areas become subject to an awful, lingering curse that burns them alive from the inside out, leaving naught but ash and dust behind. Not every vale chosen by the Blade of Skies is destroyed. A handful are able to flee to safety before the army is in position to attack. A very small number are able to hold their own, though they suffer punishing losses in the process. A rumour spreads that any settlements that manage to endure an entire day of attacks are spared, at least for now, with the Blade of Skies turning their attention elsewhere. A month before the winter solstice, the Blade of Skies attacks the largest settlement so far. Olvanshka and Kamienshik are known for the 3 Warden Fellowships that call it home. Despite the best efforts of the defenders there, the Vale falls. A column of black smoke hangs in the sky above the ruins for 3 days. And from western Kamienshik, an odd tale emerges, carried by a certain ragged-cloaked storyteller who seems unafraid of the Scions rampaging across southern Karov. To hear them tell it, they saw a band of Scions approach the weird weeping stone that lies near the border with Hanmark, perhaps seeking to find a route through to where the Silence Ark preparing to lay siege to Valenshal. When they come within sight of the stone, however, they immediately retreat and do not return. Perhaps even the Heralds of Day are not immune to the touch of fear. They do not fear the people of Vorushka, however, that much is certain. After Olvanshka, the Blade of Skies returns to Dizikani. As the winter solstice approaches, as the first snows of a late winter begin to fall across Karov, the Scions finally move against Delev. They march towards the vale many consider the richest in western Vorushka, one that could someday rival Temeshwar itself. A great many of those who have fled their vales have taken shelter behind the walls of Delev. Their town is swollen with desperate refugees, most with little more than the clothes on their backs. Delev is the best defended vale in the south, after all, thanks to the work of Henry Ward, yet those defences were built to deal with bandits and the occasional pack of wolves, not to turn back an army of Scions bent on destruction. If the Blade of Skies can breach those defences, if they can bring upon it the same destruction that razed Bulgakov and Olvanshka and a dozen other vales between, then the accompanying slaughter will rival anything that has happened in Vorushka in 50 years or more. Time is running out for Delev. Game information. Karov. Cold Sun is around 1/10 of the way towards conquering Duzikani. Several hundred people have been slain by the Blade of Skies across southern Karov. The prosperity of the entire territory has been impacted by the loss of prosperous Vales, reducing the money to the Imperial Treasury going forwards. Unlike Livards, the region has not gained the ruins quality. The Blade of Skies does not leave enough behind to make this the case. Instead, Duzikani has gained the sunburned quality. The areas of black glass scattered around the region are dangerous to approach, potentially inflicting a slow death on anyone who approaches them. The damage is potentially reversible if Cold Sun is driven out of the territory, but it will become harder to do so if the Blade of Skies conquers more of the region. In the event the Blade of Skies captures an entire region, it will become permanent and not reversible with ritual magic. Finally, the contested nature of the region and the threat to Delev has impacted the entire northern trade network. Following the winter solstice, the overseer of the Westward Road will be unable to use their ministry. The other 4 titles, the Bone Setter of Torfas Trading Post, the Broker of Trey Wayhouse, the Northbound Trademaster, and the Kalpim Tradeholder, are unable to use the eastern route Karov Ministry. This is likely to continue to be the case as long as the Blade of Skies is in Duzikani. In the event Delev is destroyed, then it is likely to be permanent. The Bargainer of the Iron Tower is likewise unable to use their ministry. The Iron Round Tower is directly threatened by the Blade of Skies, and in the event that Delev is destroyed, then the tower will likely meet the same fate. There is no sign of the bees returning to Duzikani while the Scions are present, or any indication of where they might have gone. The devastation of the Trods. 3 weeks before the winter solstice, an unseen pulse of magical energies surges through Volodmarts and Karov. Most Varushkans are entirely unaware of it, or at least to begin with. The first people to realise what has happened here are those Navarstridings travelling through western Varushka, who experience the effects firsthand as the Trods are burned out from underneath them. Every Trod, in both territories, is ripped to pieces over the space of a dozen heartbeats. It seems that the destruction of the Trods in Hercynia last season might have been as much about testing their magic and understanding their power as actually ruining them. There are reports that a few magicians, those responsible for drawing out the power of the Valorn as they move across the Empire, suffer serious burns. The spring magic that empowers the Trods is overwhelmed for an instant by purifying thaumaturgic radiance, pouring through them like floodwaters down a narrow streambed. Crafted to slowly draw out the maleficent magic of the Great Mistake, the Trods are not made to survive contact with the raw power of the Day Realm. They are blasted asunder, with small amounts of that power flowing briefly through those closest to the Trod. Some Vates consider this destruction to be a good thing, given the alternatives they envision. The Trods can be replaced. If they had channeled the might of the Cold Sun, then they might have spread a devastating fire across both territories, irrespective of any magical protections, with potentially catastrophic results for a land so richly forested. It doesn't bear thinking about, given how many settlements lie near the Trods. Participation, Navarre. The Trods of Volodmarts and Karov have been severed, and will prove difficult to restore. As long as an army of Cold Sun remains in the territory, any attempt to perform the Dance of Navarre and Thorn targeting the territory will fail. Even before the Trods are fully formed, the Scions will rip them apart again. Indeed, it might be dangerous to restore any of the Trods until the armies of Cold Sun are expelled from the Empire. The nature of the Day Realm is to study and learn, and the more chance they have to interact with active Trods, or if they're able to observe them forming, the more likely it is that they might find some way to spread their destruction more widely. Any Navarre magician who possesses at least one rank of Spring Law, and whose striding has been in Volodmarts or Karov in the period since the autumn equinox, may have been harmed by the destruction of the Trods. You may wish to apply Scar Effect burns, which are slow to heal even with healing magic. If you are such a character and wish your character to have been more intimately affected by the sudden rush of energy that obliterated the Trods, you can email plot@profouндecisions.co.uk with your CID before the 18th of April, and we will provide you with a traumatic wound. This will represent the lingering effects of exposure to the power of the Day Realm, manifesting as serious burns, and parts of your body turning to ash. Be warned, however, that if the wound is not dealt with, it will prove fatal.